Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Ryer, and I am Chair of the Board. Welcome to the Annual General Meeting of the Trillium Mutual Insurance Company for the period ending December 31st, 2020. This is our first online annual general meeting, which will be facilitated via webcast, and I hope this format does work well for everyone. If you do happen to have any technical issues, please click on the technical support button at the top of your screen. As 2020 Chair of the Board, I will be acting as Chair for this meeting. Corporate Secretary Brian Hicks will be acting as Recording Secretary and Parliamentarian. Our Board of Directors are all in attendance today, either online or in our meeting room here in Listowel, of course, following all the safety protocols. They are Patrick Bushby, our newest director, whom you'll meet later, Julie Garner, Angela DeGroot, Ross Lamont, and Kong Rong Zi. Tracy McDonald, President and CEO, is also in attendance. I am also advised by staff that there are a number of former staff and directors attending online. It is traditional to recognize them all by name. Unfortunately, our format today limits my ability to do so. I would like, however, to thank each of you for your continuing dedication to Trillium Mutual Insurance. As this is our first online AGM, let me walk you through how voting will work. You will recall that during registration, information was provided to confirm policyholder status. Policyholders are considered members of the corporation. I will allow time for members to indicate if they wish to ask a question before requesting the mover and seconder on a motion. All discussions and questions will be conducted using the chat function, so enter any comments or questions in the Ask a Question box on your screen and click Submit. Comments and questions are being monitored, and we will make every effort to respond appropriately. Once questions have been addressed, voting members at designated times during the meeting will be asked to vote on the motions presented. A pop-up will appear on your screen with first a mover and a seconder button with the vote options of yes, no, and abstain below it. You will be able to click on the mover or seconder button as well. Once the motion has been moved and seconded, you can then vote. Once your selection is made, you will see another pop-up at the bottom right of your screen confirming that your vote was received. Only eligible voting members will see the vote option appear on their screen. If you are behind a firewall or using a VPN, you may not see the vote appear, so please turn off any VPN. Once the vote is concluded, the results will be displayed, and I will indicate whether the motion is carried or not carried. You will notice some delays throughout the process, and this is normal. So now to try this out, let's proceed with a test vote and have you participate. The test motion, do you drink coffee in the morning, will appear on the screen.
seconder Tammy McAleer. In favor, 73%. Opposed, 27%.
Thank you. It appears the test vote was successful and the motion was carried, by the way. If you had an issue with the vote, please click on the technical support button on the top right of your screen. We can now proceed with the formal portion and begin the annual general meeting. Our corporate secretary now advises that more than 25 members are present in person. Quorum has therefore been reached. I will now call this meeting to order. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the call to order rules of order, and only business properly in the interest of the company and its members will be considered. The agenda for the meeting today is as follows. First will be the Chair of the Board of Directors report, followed by the report of the Audit and Risk Review Committee, then the presentation of the 2020 financial statements and Auditor's report, followed by the motion to approve the financial statements, the motion to appoint auditors for 2021. There is a motion to amend bylaw 3.03 that deals with the qualifications of directors. There is a motion concerning the election of directors, and then we have other business. The AGM will then be adjourned. Tracy McDonald will then report on operations in 2020, and there will be a guest speaker with a Q&A to follow, and we're pleased to have Andrew Campbell of Fresh Air Media as our guest speaker. In order to make this meeting as efficient as possible for online format, some of the reports have been pre-recorded, including my chair's report. We will make every effort to allow members to express and ask any questions through the chat forum. So we will now proceed with the chair's report. Thank you. I am pleased to bring you greetings and provide this report on behalf of the Board of Directors at Trillium Mutual Insurance Company. Thank you. Annual meeting. This past year is unprecedented in our lifetimes. Personal and business impacts have been significant for many and will be felt for years to come. Thankfully, it is truly amazing to see the resilience, compassion, and generosity that often rises to the forefront when we need it most. A year, or perhaps years like this, however, are not unprecedented in the history of Trillium Mutual. With over 135 years of existence, this policyholder-owned organization has weathered many storms. To give you a sense of this history, I look back at the organizational meeting minutes for the period 1918 to 1920 during the Spanish flu outbreak. As I'm sure you've heard, this outbreak was equally widespread, but even more devastating. What I found was really interesting. It hardly got a mention in the minutes. Yes, it was serious, but it did not deter us or deflect us from the important needs of our policyholders. Business appeared to carry on more or less as normal. Renewals and policies were provided and claims were paid to members. They could count on us. This past year saw much the same results. I give top marks to our staff for being well prepared and executing a move to virtual work more or less seamlessly. I know they worked hard to be accommodating, flexible, and sensitive to the challenges that everyone faced. Our focus remained on meeting the needs of our policyholders and our broker partners, as it has for over 135 years. The technology certainly has changed, but the philosophy has not. The business of insurance is a challenging one. We provide coverage for risks that are largely unknown in both frequency and significance. Add to that the considerable impacts of things like climate change and a pandemic or two, and it can get really interesting. Although we are local, we of course are part of the worldwide insurance marketplace through our reinsurer. So we are by no means immune from the impact of these global events. As we have seen this past year, this world we live in can be rather unpredictable. Where we can and do make a difference is in two key areas. The first is stability. Our policyholders have been able to count on us for many, many years. Our focus remains on taking care of and always being there for all of our stakeholders. Our structure is such that regardless of the broader challenges, we remain focused on long-term stability and not short-term profitability. We plan to continue to be here when you need us. The other important advantage we bring is local ownership. You, the policyholders, are the owners. Our organization, our staff, and our broker partners are all deeply ingrained in their communities. The dollars largely stay local to pay claims, of course, and to support the careers at Trillium and, where possible, other worthy causes in our communities. You are dealing with local people that live and work here. They care deeply and answer only to you. In terms of community support, our Roots Community Fund continues to actively support many areas of need. With the unique challenges this year has brought, the decision was made to devote significant resources to mental health support. We are pleased to have been able to provide over $100,000 to these programs focused on agricultural and rural communities and youth. As you will see, our financial performance in 2020 was solid. A modest underwriting gain was enhanced by what turned out to be a relatively good year for investment income. But I will say that this was by no means evident as the year progressed, with the investment marketplace best being described as a roller coaster throughout the year. The ability to add to our reserves is welcome to both offset prior year shortfalls and to help ensure our future growth and stability. I would also mention that we did not receive funding from any of the government pandemic support programs. 2020 also saw the retirement of Ross Stone from our board. Ross has completed the maximum term of 15 years on our board as per our bylaws. Ross has certainly been a top-notch contributor to the success of Trillium with his agricultural knowledge, entrepreneurial spirit, and keen business sense. Ross will certainly be missed at the board table. We wish to extend our deep appreciation for his service and wish him all the best in the future. I am also pleased to announce that after an extensive search, Mr. Patrick Bushby has been appointed as our newest board member. Pat lives in Thunder Bay and brings a wealth of agricultural, business, and governance experience from across Canada. We welcome Pat to the board and look forward to the benefit of his experience and expertise. In closing, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to serve as your chair. I would also like to express our gratitude to our policyholders and broker partners for trusting us with your insurance requirements. I would also like to convey my deep appreciation to our staff for the manner in which they navigated the challenges of this past year while never losing sight of our core mission, serving our policyholder members. No doubt the coming year will bring new and different challenges, hopefully not so significant. However, I am confident that no matter what, Trillium Mutual will be here when you need us. Thank you. I now invite Kong Rong Zi, Chair of the Audit and Risk Review Committee, to provide her report. Kong Rong.
Thank you, Ben. Hello, everyone. The Audit and Risk Review Committee of the Board of Directors meets as required to review the financial affairs of the corporation, to certify that the company follows its risk management program, and to ensure compliance with legal requirements. The committee met with the auditors, on February 17, 2021, to review the audit financial statements and discuss the findings of the 2020 audit. The auditors once again confirmed a high degree of transparency and cooperation with employees of the company during the audit. The committee has endorsed the report of the auditors to the board for recommendation to you, the members of Trillium Mutual Insurance Company. I now invite Lindsay Robinson, Corporate Treasurer, to present the 2020 financial statements and audited report.
Thank you, Ben. I'm here today to present the highlights of the 2020 financial statements and the auditor's report. I would like to begin by showing a slide on the 2020 results of some of our key financial metrics. 2020 was a very strong year financially for Trillium Mutual. We experienced modest premium growth, improvements in the combined net loss and expense ratios over the prior year, which led to an underwriting profit. Coupled with strong investment income after taxes, we experienced a net income of $6.5 million, which added to the prior year surplus, bringing total surplus to $65.1 million. These metrics will form the base of my presentation today, where for the next few slides graphically display each of these key financial highlights from 2020 and the prior 4 years. The top bar graph on each slide is the 2020 result and our focus for today. On our first slide, in 2020, we experienced an underwriting profit of $1.1 million. Having experienced underwriting losses totaling $7.5 million in the prior 2 years, it was significant that the company had an underwriting profit for the year. Our investment portfolio performed very well despite market volatility in 2020, resulting in total investment income of $7 million. This was the largest investment gain in the last 5 years. Total comprehensive income after taxes in 2020 was $6.5 million. We have experienced an overall comprehensive income in 4 of the last 5 years. Looking at gross premiums written, Trillium ended 2020 with $71.6 million in total gross premiums written. This graph shows that we experienced continuous and steady growth in premiums over the last 5 years. Our net loss ratio has fluctuated over the last 5 years between a low of 59% to a high of 70%. The 2020 net loss ratio is 60.32%, an improvement in the loss ratio over the prior 2 years. Total member surplus at December 31st was $65.1 million. 2 years of comprehensive profit has led to the highest surplus the company has ever experienced. One of our primary measures of profitability is the combined ratio, as it measures total expenditures over net revenue. This allows us to measure how well the company is performing operationally, as it does not include income or loss from investments. For 2020, our year-end combined ratio was 98.21% compared to 105.43 at the end of 2019. This line graph shows our view of the combined ratio since amalgamation in 2004, with a low in 2012 at 71.73% and a high in 2018 at 107.75% and our current year at 98.21%. In our business, it is important to look at multiple years, not just a single or most recent year. Our 17-year average since amalgamation is 98%, and our 10-year average is 98.5%, and our 5-year average is 102.71%. One of our key priorities is to grow premiums and maintain surplus to create strong financial position. We feel we have been very successful in achieving this. The gray bars on the graph represent the premiums of the company over the last 17 years, growing from $27.8 million in 2004 to $70.9 million, which is overall $43 million in premium growth. The magenta bars show surplus since 2004 with $17.7 million to $65.1 million in 2020, a surplus growth of $47.4 million. Since amalgamation, premiums have more than doubled and surplus has more than tripled. The final graph shows the company's minimum capital test ratio. This MCT ratio is used by our regulator, FSRA, to ensure the financial stability of the company. The regulator sets a minimum ratio of 150%. Our board has set an internal target for the MCT at 315%. This internal target was first set in 2013. The internal target is well above our regulator requirement. Since 2010, Trillium has sat well above the target and has ended 2020 at 391.85%. Our year-end audit was conducted by BDO Canada's Walkerton office and was led by partner Dennis Kramer and senior manager Stephanie Blake Armstrong, both who are in virtual attendance today. The financial statements are comprised of 31 pages with the contents listed on the screen. The auditors completed their fieldwork in early February, presented to the Audit and Risk Review Committee and the Board of Directors, where the board then approved the financial statements on February 17, 2021. I will now read from the auditor's report. To the policyholders of Trillium Mutual Insurance Company, we have audited the consolidated financial statements of Trillium Mutual Insurance Company and its subsidiaries, the group, which comprise the consolidated statement of financial position as at December 31st, 2020, and the consolidated statements of the comprehensive income, consolidated member surplus, and the consolidated cash flows for the year then ended, and the notes to the consolidated financial statements, including a summary of significant accounting policies. The auditor's opinion was, in our opinion, the consolidated financial statements present fairly in all material aspects the financial position of the group as at December 31st, 2020, and its consolidated financial performance and its consolidated cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with international financial reporting standards. Signed, Chartered Professional Accountants, Licensed Public Accountants, Walkerton, Ontario, February 17, 2021. And I would just like to note that the full report along with the financial statements is on our website for review, and a paper copy can be made available if requested. Thank you.
I will now allow time for questions to be entered through the chat function.
Mr. Chair, we are showing no questions.
Thank you. Seeing no questions, I will now call for a motion to approve the 2020 financial statements of Trillium Mutual Insurance Company as presented.
Chair, on the motion to approve the 2020 financial statements, we show mover A. Chuck Allison, seconder Krista Bester. We have 43 voters, 100% voting in favor. None opposed.
Thank you. The motion is carried. Your Board of Directors recommends that BDO Canada again be appointed as auditors for Trillium Mutual Insurance Company for 2021. Are there any questions arising concerning this matter? I will now allow time for questions to be entered through the chat function.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Seeing no questions, I will now call for a motion to appoint BDO Canada as the company's auditors for 2021.
Mr. Chair, we're showing the results of the motion to appoint BDO Canada as 2021 auditors of Trillium Mutual Insurance Company. The mover is Krista Bester. The seconder is Pauline Benninger. There are 48 voting members, 100% voting in favor, none opposed.
Thank you. That motion is carried. I now invite Julie Garner, Chair of the Governance Committee, to lead this next portion of our meeting. Thank you. Julie?
Hello, my name is Julie Garner, and I served as the Vice Chair in 2020 of the Board of Directors and the Chair of the Governance Committee. The annual mandate of the Governance Committee includes reviewing bylaws to ensure that they are modern and in keeping with best practices and reflect the desired business practices of the company. Trillium Mutual has maintained a director term limit since it was formed in amalgamation in 2004. The company is attempting to strike a good balance so that it can achieve the most qualified directors. The 3-year term limit has worked well, supporting continuity of knowledge and experiencing, while encouraging renewal and diversity. The current bylaw, 3.03, allows for the potential 6th term if certain conditions have been met. Since amalgamation, no director has served a 6th term. After having considered the bylaw and having received appropriate advice, the committee determined that the bylaw is unnecessarily complex. The committee recommends removing the exception and retaining a simple limit of 5 3-year terms. Are there any questions from the recommendation to amend the bylaw? I'll now allow time for questions to be entered through the chat function.
Seeing no questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Brian. Seeing no questions, I would now like to call a motion to approve bylaw 3.03 as presented.
Madam Chair, we're showing mover Tammy McAleer, seconder A. Chuck Ellison. We have 43 members, that's 98%, voting in favor. We have 1 member, that's 2%, showing as opposed, none abstained.
Thank you very much. Motion is carried. I would now like to move on to the election of the directors. The bylaws of the company require that every general meeting, 1/3 of the total number of directors shall be elected for a period of 3 years. This year, the term of Ben Ryer and Ross Stone are expiring. I'm chairing this portion of the meeting because Ben Ryer is a director seeking re-election. Ross Stone retired from the board of directors, as our chair mentioned earlier, effective December 31st, 2020. And the board appointed Patrick Bushby to complete the remaining term in office in accordance with our bylaws. Bylaw 3.06 requires that members interested in seeking election or re-election to the board of directors must file an intention to stand for election in writing with the secretary of the corporation no later than 30 days prior to the annual general meeting. Ben Ryer and Patrick Bushby have each filed a notice of intention, and no other eligible members have filed. With that said, I hereby declare that Ben Ryer and Patrick Bushby are acclaimed as directors of Trillium Mutual Insurance for a period of 3 years. Congratulations, Ben and Patrick. I would now like to invite Patrick Bushby and Ben Ryer in turn to provide you with brief remarks. Patrick?
Thank you, Julie. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your support in providing me this opportunity to serve on the board of our great organization. I assure you that I will endeavor to support the mutual interests of Trillium and all its stakeholders. Thanks again. And with that, I will turn it over to Ben.
Thank you, Julie. And thank you, Pat. And Pat, welcome to the team. From my perspective, I thank you for the opportunity to continue to serve the policyholders, staff, and broker partners of Trillium Mutual Insurance Company. My family have been policyholders for over 100 years. So I am very proud of our legacy and, of course, very confident in our future. I will do my best to ensure our continued success. This brings us to the final item on our business agenda this morning. Is there any other business to be brought properly before the membership of the company? And I will wait for questions.
Mr. Chair, we've been referred a question from a member. What discussions has Trillium had on climate change and the impact on its business?
That is a very good and certainly a timely question, and one that we do consider in everything we do. Certainly the remote work opportunities have offered us the opportunity to do a little bit of our part in reducing our impact on climate. And we also look at our investment portfolio and are reviewing it in terms of the complete ESG package. And part of that, of course, is the sustainable investing from a climate standpoint. So those are all things that are under active consideration by Trillium. Thank you.
We're showing no further questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. As there are no further questions, the business of the corporation is now complete. I hereby declare that this business portion of the meeting is adjourned. I will now turn the meeting over to our President and CEO, Tracy McDonald, to continue with the information session portion of the meeting and our guest speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Good morning to all, and thank you for attending our first ever virtual AGM. 2020 was a year of significant global challenge. We turned the annual calendar with a renewed sense of hope for 2021, only to be hit with the continued reality of challenge with variants looming and the vaccination program rollout. I believe to manage a business during crisis, the most critical piece is to look after the people that make up that business. I am proud of how Trillium handled the unique needs of every staff member during 2020, and they in turn looked after the needs of our members. As we heard from Lindsay during the AGM portion of the meeting, Trillium's financial performance was strong in 2020. This was a welcome change after 2 years of underwriting loss. The market values of our investments ended strong, allowing us to add to member surplus. I promised to keep my comments brief this morning. To begin, I'd like to virtually introduce you to our leadership team here at Trillium. The executive team has been in place for just over a year. Jenny Hallahan serves in the role of Vice President of People and Innovation, and Mike Verley as Vice President of Operations. I want to thank both Jenny and Mike for their leadership in stewarding the company through one of the most challenging years in our history. I'm very proud to work alongside them. In addition, annually, the board appoints corporate officers. You've met Lindsay Robinson, who has served as our corporate treasurer since 2016, and I'm virtually introducing you to Brian Hicks, serving as corporate secretary since 2011. I am pleased to work closely with our board of 6. Ben Ryer, our board chair, effectively led this team through change during 2020. I would like to thank the board for the guidance in governing the organization. We quickly pivoted to virtual meetings in March of last year and continue to meet on at least a monthly basis to discuss the business of the organization. I want to thank them all for their commitment in this past year. In 2019, our board met and approved a 3-year strategic plan which focused on disciplined underwriting resulting in capital growth. 2020 was the first year of that plan to improve our overall financial performance, improve broker relations, and improve or maintain our employee and corporate culture. I want to tell you about one initiative under each pillar that was achieved in 2020. First, our goal to improve our financial performance showed a positive outcome in 2020. The reduction in weather-related claims certainly assisted with this achievement. Fire losses continue to impact our overall financial position. Moving forward, to assist with managing the peril of fire, we are actively promoting the use of technology devices to detect electrical faults before a fire occurs. We have engaged with a company called PrevTech Innovations. They have built a solution to monitor and manage the electrical health of agricultural buildings. The benefits of these systems include increasing operational efficiencies on the farm and detecting faults before a fire happens. To test the system, we engaged in a pilot to learn more and determine its effectiveness. In late 2020, we officially launched the program and are actively installing units on farms across Ontario through our broker partners. Rather than me telling you about the merits of the system, I want to share a 1-minute video from one of our members who had the system installed during our pilot.
One morning, I'd been in the barn and was leaving, and the system sent me a message. And so I went back through that area where I knew that panel was, where the alarm was coming from, and didn't see any sign of any problem. But then on my way back through again, seeing that there was one switch box on one of the fans that there was actually smoke coming from, and a significant amount of smoke too. And so I was able to shut things down and replace a bunch of those components. And once again, it was just related to moisture, and was able to fix that. And without it notifying me, I would have left the barn and not been back in that specific area for quite some time. So.
Please get in touch with your broker if you want to learn more about Trillium's offering of PrevTech. Secondly, the pillar to improve our broker relations. 2020 was a year of change in how we interact with our brokers. Early on in the pandemic, we shifted our focus to virtual connections and learnings. Throughout the year, we delivered 26 virtual events with 320 brokers participating. We continue to evolve our delivery method and have delivered 9 virtual events so far in 2021, with more coming. In addition, we launched Trillium's first ever podcast with a focus on Ontario agriculture. It's called The Back 40, and it's hosted by our agribusiness specialist, Mike Brine. Have a listen on any platform. Finally, our last pillar, to improve and maintain our employee and corporate culture. The most significant sense of pride we have here at Trillium is giving back. And 2020 was no different. Early on, our board of directors made a decision to focus our efforts on rural mental health during the pandemic. Our teams got to work determining organizations and causes that would benefit from funding to assist in their initiatives. I'm pleased to say that since the program started several years ago, the Roots Community Fund, coupled with our community support dollars, have given back more than $1.9 million to communities across Ontario. If you know of a capital project or a mental health initiative in your community, please visit our website to apply. We're always looking for new projects and initiatives to support. In closing, I want to express my sincere appreciation for placing your trust in us. While we can't always predict the curveballs that are thrown our way, we aim to make things financially right after these events occur. It is why we are here. I now have the great privilege of introducing our guest speaker for today, Andrew Campbell. Andrew has quickly become one of the most passionate and recognized advocates for modern agriculture in North America. He brings a unique perspective to both the agricultural industry and the general public. Andrew's company, Fresh Air Media, is dedicated to helping producers and consumers understand each other better through education. He is a multi-generation farmer with ag roots dating back to 1794. He currently operates a dairy farm and a grain farm in Southern Ontario. And together with his wife, Jess, and their 2 kids, they help those in the ag industry share their passion and teach consumers about farmers and their role in feeding the world. Andrew will be discussing the many changes currently affecting Ontario farms and how to manage these shifting demands, whether it's the impact of COVID-19, changing consumer patterns, or simply that farms are growing larger and more specialized each year. These changes are having a huge and lasting impact on every aspect of Ontario agriculture. Please join me in welcoming Andrew Campbell.
Well, thanks very much, Tracy. It is a real pleasure to be a part of the Trillium Mutual Annual General Meeting. Of course, it's a little less exciting when we can't have some coffee and a few snacks and have a visit, but at least we can still get together virtually for this, and certainly look forward to being able to actually getting together at the office once in a while in the next year or so. But I mean, really, when we think back to the last meeting, to the meeting we're at today, like really, we're thinking about quite a year. And even when I start thinking about going back to that, you know, kind of early to mid-March. I mean, how much stuff actually changed? Like, do you remember? I remember myself sitting in my optometrist's office and they were discussing about the fact that where could you possibly find toilet paper? Because of course it was gone from every grocery store in town. It was gone from every grocery store in every other town as some kind of hoarding, panic buying situation. And that was before everything even really shut down. And so it's one of those things that then when you start to go through that progress of how we all kind of reacted when things did get shut down and how governments reacted and businesses reacted and all those things, it was really new territory for us all. And certainly, you know, from my perspective, coming from kind of the world of agriculture and the world of farming, certainly, you know, there were a lot of changes that did go on in those early days. I know, you know, we're here on the dairy farm, and obviously, you know, it's no news to anybody. You probably heard it yourselves about, you know, that progress in terms of what happened when some milk started being dumped. Well, that all fit into this whole chaos that everybody got thrown into when we talked about, you know, these supply chains changing, when all of a sudden we couldn't go to a restaurant anymore, but we had to buy all of our groceries now at a grocery store. But grocery stores, we had lineups, and all of these click and collect programs were kind of surging with demand. There was really so much uncertainty in those first few weeks. And I mean, we had lots of uncertainty follow through that, and we continue, I think, to have a lot of uncertainty through a lot of this pandemic thing. When we start to think about, you know, temporary foreign worker programs and the fact that, you know, a lot of friends of mine that are in, you know, either greenhouses or trees or fruit and vegetable, you know, there was a lot of concern about how do some of these workers come into the country? What are the rules going to be when they're here? How would they get home? You know, we're a year later, and I'm not real confident that we have all those answers going into another growing season. I think we're going to continue to see some of that uncertainty in terms of how are we going to, you know, get some of these workers up into the country as we head into the springtime. The other one I know we've heard lots of is, you know, the outbreaks that have happened at processing plant that obviously have pretty tremendous impact on, really, you know, when we had that Guelph closure, you know, area beef farmers were thrown into a lot of uncertainty through that because, you know, where do your animals go when the largest packing plant in the province all of a sudden won't accept animals anymore? And so I think it is one of those things that we've seen a lot of ripples, we've seen a lot of uncertainty over the last year within agriculture. I don't think we're out of the woods yet with that. It doesn't mean, and this is certainly a big thing, it doesn't mean that we're not fortunate within agriculture and we're not fortunate as farmers because of the ability we're still producing food, we're still going to work every day. But I think when we start to think about some of these supply chains, how things are going to react as, you know, we continue to see this roll out for the next few months, as we continue to see, you know, some of these supply chains try to convert back to maybe more restaurants in the summertime, maybe reopening some of the events if we get into fall or winter, that's all part of the process that I think we're going through. We've certainly seen it in the dairy side where there definitely is uncertainty, you know, in terms of where milk demand is going to go into the future. There's certainly some stabilization in it, and, you know, we've all figured out kind of new ways to do things, but what's that going to look like in the next few months? And so that's really what I wanted to chat a little bit about is, you know, where do we think things are going to go? Because this is just as important for my business as it is for your businesses too, to at least think through a little bit and think through some of the ideas in terms of what can we expect, you know, one in agriculture and two, obviously, just as rural communities. Because as I said before, when we think about, you know, one of the things that I'm very fortunate about is that fact that I get to get up in the morning and go to work every day. Yeah, there's been a few changes to it in how I deal with, you know, some of the suppliers we have. There's been some changes in how I go to, you know, stores or how I get parts or things like that. But at the end of the day, the milk truck is still coming to pick things up. And I know that a lot of folks in other agriculture industries are finding that same thing, whether it be a greenhouse, whether it be a poultry barn, whether it be a grain farm. Sure, there's been a few changes here and there, but overall, we're really, really lucky to be, still going to work and still being able to sell that product and still being able to sell it for some sectors, at pretty good prices, thanks to kind of the boom that is commodity prices, lately. Now, the other thing that I think I'm really fortunate to, and I think a lot of other Canadians are now kind of waking up to, is being in a rural area, being in a rural community. The nice thing, and I still am very thankful for the fact that when we look back to a year ago when all of a sudden the kids didn't go back to school after March break and they're kind of hanging around home for months. I had friends in the city of Toronto that, if you're in a condo that, all of a sudden playgrounds are closed, arenas are closed, they're taking the kids out to the sidewalk or into an alleyway to bounce a ball around for a few minutes a day, where I was so fortunate that we could literally kick the kids outside and let them have kind of a little more space. The thing is, and this is one of the important things that I think for us in rural communities, is the fact that a lot of people realize that too, and there is an enormous boom going on in terms of that migration of people, I think, out of larger centers. Now, it doesn't mean that people in downtown Toronto are all looking to live in, a new subdivision in Atwood. I don't think we're quite to that step, but it is a case of, okay, if people from Toronto want to move to Kitchener or Guelph or Waterloo or somewhere like that, then are people in Kitchener and Guelph and Waterloo, are they moving to a town like Listowel? And then people in the town of Listowel, are they moving and trying to find kind of a country property? We're down here in Middlesex County, and certainly it's one of those things that we've seen in our small communities and seen those houses that do come up for sale. They do not last long on the market. We're talking hours, at most days, for some of these places because there is such that hot demand. So it brings me to start thinking about, okay, as rural communities, how does that impact us longer? And are we as rural communities ready for that? Are we ready for some expansion into development into more of these subdivisions? If there is such a demand for housing in a town like Listowel, or for us, a town like Strathroy, or for Glencoe, there already is talk about some big expansion into some of these subdivisions. We've got to be ready, I think, to welcome more and more people to our rural communities, because this is the stuff that is going to continue to have services where, the municipality can continue to invest in arenas, small businesses can continue to thrive on Main Street. Personally, I think we need this for rural Canada. It is just a case of we have to be ready and welcoming and be ready with that infrastructure. So that kind of, talks about the movement, but there's also the people involved. And this is one thing that I truly find fascinating, is how many people within agriculture have, found ways to kind of modify the way they're doing things in order to better react to the market condition. Certainly one of the ones, my friend Jen Christie and her fiance, some of you will know, her and their new restaurant up in Paisley, Bonfire on Queens. Just an awesome place to be. We've been lucky enough to go up there, but I think she's a really great example of somebody in the food chain who has had to react in pretty big ways. When we think back to a year ago, that was when they wanted to open and nothing could be opened. And then, I spoke to her before, this conversation, and the idea that they had this space kind of out back that they thought they'd turn into a patio, and wouldn't that be nice if they had a patio? Well, all of a sudden, when, kind of the nice weather of springtime came around and they could open, that became the priority. And all of a sudden, that shift away and that willingness to shift how they wanted to do their business and where they wanted to operate within their structure, changed quite a bit. And I know she has talked a lot about how popular that was as the environment that, yeah, people could go, they still could go to a restaurant, get a really good meal, maybe meet with some friends or two, and because they were in that outdoor setting, felt safer and more comfortable. Now, I know for her and a lot of other people within the food chain, there is still that real want to get back to a little more normal. because, you know, when you look at a business like that, you know, they rely on people wanting to get together, wanting to listen to good music, wanting to get together with friends and have a good meal and have a few drinks and all that kind of stuff. And that just requires a more open environment where people can meet up and do that. So I know there is still a real want to be able to get there and get to that point and get open and be safe whenever all of this starts to ease up. So I think that's one thing that, you know, shows that, yeah, people do have to make some changes to their business, to their structures, but they've been able to and found some success. On farms themselves, you know, I've heard from a lot of different farms that have kind of started to take more and more advantage of this space that is that direct to consumer. You know, certainly what we heard, you know, a year ago was this mass demand for all of a sudden everybody wanted a side of beef, everybody wanted a side of pork. You know, animals, butcher shops, you know, we're seeing a tremendous surge in demand. Our butcher shop that we have down here, you know, I called, what are we now in March? I called back in probably early January and got space for November. That's the capacity that they have. So I think what we need to do as an industry is start to go back to that area where, you know, I say 10 years ago, I think a lot within agriculture and a lot of farmers were quite concerned about the contraction and and the loss of some of this processing capacity. Well, now I think we need to start to wake up and drive some more investment in that. And that includes, you know, not just in, you know, big plants and bringing, you know, big producers and processors back, but I think it also includes, you know, how can we support smaller, you know, on-farm processing? We've seen, you know, more and more on the dairy side. You know, in our area, we've got 3 different farms looking at, considering, and or building on-farm processing plants because of that real drive to want to connect with a consumer and a consumer that wants to connect with a farmer. So it is one of those that, you know, when you're looking at your own businesses or if you're looking at how to support some of your clients, it is one of those things of how are some of these shifts going to impact their needs? If all of a sudden, you know, they want to do more of that direct sale, or they want to bring people to a farm to have more of these tours, or they want to do whatever it is, I think we really do have some, you know, big connections to go on and actually drive some of this new business. Now, that does not mean, and I certainly don't want to give the impression that doesn't mean that there is not going to be a place and a continued demand for, you know, some of the larger scale direct to processing, direct to export, all of that, because I mean, right now, you know, commodity prices over 6 months have been booming. And so it is one of those situations where I think we're going to continue to see that drive as well. But how do we have these two splits where we've got that, you know, direct to processor doing it at a larger scale, commodity scale, and we have more and more that are carving out those niches and carving out more of those direct to consumer sales. I think we're going to see both, and it's going to change as we go along. So certainly, I think, you know, as we look ahead to what some of the other things, I should actually mention, because the other one that I find fascinating to go along with this is everybody's instinct to maybe do a little more food on their own. I know I was one of them in the springtime that here we thought, okay, well, kids are home. Let's give another crack at growing a garden, which, to be honest, we've been terrible at in years past. We're very good at starting them. We're maybe not so good in, you know, when we get haying in July, that maybe it doesn't get watered, maybe it doesn't get weeded, and things go south pretty fast. But we gave it another try, and I went and I built the raised flower, you know, garden boxes. So here I went and, you know, I got 2x6s and, you know, built them up and all that kind of stuff. And I know the guy at the lumber yard talked about the fact that he had never seen so much demand for 2x6s because everybody else was doing the exact same thing we were doing. So it is one of those things. It'll be interesting to see how, you know, kind of on a smaller scale, that thing, you know, what kind of relationship will people have with food and food production as they grow it in their own backyards? And then how will other businesses react to that? I know there's a greenhouse down this way that they are in the propagation business, so they're supplying small plants to lots of other greenhouses. Well, they've carved out a niche in their business as well, and now you can order online, small plants and have them delivered right to your door so you can grow. So that demand for those seedlings, is certainly, big, and, another business that's kind of carving out its niche. But basically, I think that's just one of those things that we, within agriculture, within rural communities, can think more and more about, is as we get towards what I think is the end of this pandemic and start to get to reopening, what things are you doing that, are going to change maybe back to normal, once we actually get done, and what things might actually change for good? What things about your business and how you react and how you interact with your customers and your consumers, how is that going to change into the future? Are we going to continue to see more virtual? Are we going to continue to see more paperless? I think that's probably the case. So how can you be ready to react and be ready to continue to do all of that stuff? But that's basically all I wanted to say. I know we're going to do, a few questions here in a few minutes. So by all means, you can add them to the queue. But certainly, I do want to thank you for taking the time to be part of the annual meeting, and of course for Trillium Mutual for the invitation today. One thing that I do think about, when I think about all of this and the relationship it has to, the mutual insurance business, is the fact that, some of the stuff that we're talking about is basically how mutual insurance companies were started so many years ago. Is that, interest and that willingness to, how can we work together more? How can we help the neighbor out when they need us most? I mean, that's the foundation of what mutuals are today. And I'm really pleased to see that, maybe we're shifting back to some of that stuff. And so again, a real pleasure to be with you, and I look forward to any questions.
Thanks, Andrew, for those great and insightful comments. Lots of the things we've been thinking about over the last year. I can't help but think when Ben commented that we didn't have any archives or history from the 1918 flu pandemic, on how great this will be for our archives that we can look back on as an industry, as an agriculture industry, and as a company, just to see how we reacted to some of the things Andrew is predicting after the dust settles. So I'm now going to open things up for questions. We have a little bit of time left, so please feel free to chat your questions in. And we have received a couple ahead of time, so I'm going to go over to Andrew and ask if you can help us with these questions. So Andrew, do you think when restaurants reopen and the food industry gets back going again, will the demand for local food sales, like sides of beef or pork, will continue, or will that disappear and we'll start going out for our meals again?
That's a good question. I would certainly think that for those that maybe are used to having it in the freezer, I would think there's probably, for that whole side perspective, there's probably still going to be, that demand is going to continue to ride, because I know for me, like, I like having it in the freezer. I like going to it and just picking out whatever I wanted. And I think that's probably a habit that continues. But what I certainly hope for is that we see some of that demand climb back out for individual cuts, and some of that thrive a little bit more when people do head back out and say, oh, great, now I can have that, steak that maybe I was uncomfortable with making at home, in a restaurant, because it's going to be so much better. So hopefully we kind of get a win from both.
Yeah, no, great points. I know I certainly like going to the freezer too. So great points, and maybe some people will develop some new habits. Secondly, what do you see as the #1 obstacle or potentially opportunity that farmers might see going forward?
Yeah, that's one that I always kind of fight with a little bit in my own head, because you kind of go back and forth between where do consumers end up with. I think certainly, one of the obstacles going forward is going to continue to be, kind of that perception challenge that maybe, who gets to decide what's best and how best to farm. I think that certainly, kind of fits in one of those obstacles that continues to move forward as people try to find more information about how their food's produced or things like that. That's definitely one. But what I hope is actually kind of the opportunity out of that, and I actually had a great conversation, with one person just a couple of days ago about that, continuing movement to, can we, do people want, Ontario made or Canadian made or something? Are people going to pay a little bit more attention to where it comes from, kind of going along the lines back to the side of beef or pork? Hopefully that comes out of it. I don't know. I always dream that that's a great thing, but then we always find out that once something goes on sale, then people change their minds in what they want a little.
Great, thank you. Not seeing any other questions, so thank you all. I know we've gone a little bit past time, but really appreciate you attending for our historic event today. And last but not least, I think all of you know that we did have a giveaway for our AGM today, and that will be the winner of the PrevTech Hay Probe giveaway. And a member of our team will be in touch just after the meeting to announce the winner, and we'll send that out on social media as well. So thank you all very much. Sun's shining out here in Listowel today, so we hope you all have a wonderful afternoon, and thank you so much for tuning in.